Hello everyone, my name is Austin and this is the first of a few videos I will be making about my experience going through stage 4 diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis, treatment, and other experiences while living in Japan. I'm currently 9 months in remission. These are natural curls, not chemo curls. And I've been regretting having not made cancer vlogs during my treatment. But as that old proverb says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the next best time is now. So I'm starting making videos now. Quick disclaimer though, I'm not a doctor, I never will be a doctor, I am not qualified to give medical advice. If you think you might have lymphoma, see a doctor. If you want medical advice, see a doctor. Don't ask me. I will provide timestamps below if you want to skip any parts of this video. I'm currently 28 years old. I'm from Toronto, Ontario, and since August 2016, I have been living in Japan. Prior to my diagnosis, I was very active, running 40 kilometers a week, working out 3 days a week, and still got cancer. So it happens to anyone. I was officially diagnosed with stage 4 diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in January of 2018. Um, Prior to that, though, my only typical symptom was a constant low grade fever, but I did have tangentially related symptoms since the summer of 2017. So there was roughly about a 2.5 year gap between the start of my problems and my final diagnosis. My understanding, though, is that there are some types of indolent, slow growing lymphomas which can transform into my diffuse large B cell lymphoma. But I never had this confirmed, so it's just speculation by me. So, as I mentioned, my very first cancer-related symptom appeared about 2.5 years before my diagnosis. I had just run my first 10-kilometer run ever, and I had really bad pain in my hip. This was the first time I've had hip pain that had not gone away. So I went to a hospital and had a CT scan taken. And the doctors then told me that my bone was rough. They didn't say why. There was a big language barrier between the Japanese doctors and myself. They gave me some painkillers and sent me on my way. Around the same time, though, I also had some shoulder pain, but I kind of assumed that was because of the way that I sleep. Even to this day, I shouldn't do this, but I do. I sleep kind of like this on my shoulder. So I assumed that was the cause of my shoulder pain. Now, on to the winter of the same year, the right side of my chin went numb. And if you do a quick Google search, numb chin syndrome is pretty scary. It's typically only cancer is the cause. I rushed to the dentist just to make sure it wasn't a tooth problem, and the dentist took an x-ray, showed nothing. I then went to a bigger hospital. They took a brain MRI. Maybe it was something like multiple sclerosis or something. Brain MRI was clean. I went to a medical center, basically a big hospital, research hospital, I guess. And I guess, dental doctor, he took a CT scan of my jaw, showed nothing. So at this point, I was starting to think that my whole numb chin thing was psychosomatic. But my blood tests were constantly weird. I had a lot of high white blood cells, so there was something wrong with me, but no one really knew what. This numb chin continued for a few months, I think, and until roughly the winter of early 2018. I saw a neurologist, and that neurologist prescribed me medicine called Lyrica. I was pretty confident the medicine wouldn't work, but after 2 weeks, it went away. So I don't know why, don't know how, don't know what the cause of the numb chin was, but it was cured. However, my blood tests at this time were still pretty wonky, I guess is the best way to phrase it. I had a lot of high white blood cell counts, high ALP counts. At a local hospital I went to, I had 3 blood tests taken in 3 weeks, basically. I would go to the hospital, they would check my blood, they'd say, oh, okay, you have an infection, take these antibiotics, come back next week. I did it for 3 weeks, nothing happened, still high white blood cells. They had assumed it was a viral infection somewhere in my body, so because the antibiotics didn't work. So they sent me to the largest hospital in the prefecture at the time. I was living in the a small city, I guess is yeah. So this large hospital is like average size in America and Canada. So at this large hospital, I did a pretty detailed blood test. They took about 16 vials of blood, and at the time I hated needles. I still do hate needles. I got a 4-page blood result pamphlet almost, and yeah, it had a lot of weird stuff in it. About 2 weeks later, my blood tests came back. It showed that my white blood cells were weird, my monocytes were weird, my lymphocytes were weird, and the most important one, my SIL2R, serum interleukin 2 receptor, is what that means, maybe, but please don't quote me on that. The doctors kind of said there's something wrong, but they don't know exactly. So I had 3 options. First is do inpatient testing for like 10 days, pay roughly $1,000 to get a PET scan, or wait and see. The doctor didn't think it was a huge emergency at the time, so I decided to wait and see. So next would be around June of 2018. I had something in my neck, and I assumed it was a lymph node. It was hard and painful, so I went back to the doctor. My white blood cells were still high, but I was told by that doctor that because it is painful, it is probably not serious. So, I was on my way. During the summer of 2018, in August, I moved to Osaka to start a new job, and I went to a new clinic there. I was once again told by the clinic doctor that this hard, painful lymph node was not a sign of cancer because it was painful. But he had me do a blood test anyways, and my blood test came back, and the doctor told me that because of this elevated SIL2R, that it was probably lymphoma. So I was referred to an oncologist at the local university hospital, and I went into full lymphoma research mode. So I went to this new local university hospital and I did a full body CT scan and some blood tests. The CT scan revealed that I had some kind of swollen lymph node in my abdomen. And my blood test, though, showed me that my white blood cells were now normal and that my SIL2R count was now only slightly elevated. Uh, this abnormally large lymph node did end up being cancer, though. This one did not. So this doctor, I pushed him for many, many, many days to biopsy this, and he refused, saying, "You don't have cancer, you don't need it." Um, so I kind of felt like he wasn't taking me seriously. So I ended up stopped going after a couple months. I think I started it in fall, and the last time I went was in spring. I did go to a different hospital though, because I had a doctor, recommend getting tested for RA, rheumatoid arthritis, or something like, I don't know, chronic pain syndrome or something. So I went to a different university hospital and I met a rheumatologist, and he was really good. He did a DNA test and a blood test, and he showed me that I had a increased risk of RA in the future, but not currently. And he said something about my lymphoma too, as it was a possibility, but he wouldn't know without more tests. He said that he could have done more tests, but that hospital was pretty far away, and I didn't want to go travel 3 hours a day just for a 1 hour appointment. I continued on my way. In May of 2019, I proposed to my girlfriend, now fiance, or then fiance, now wife. Um, and yeah, around this time, I started to run more, be more active, try and get healthy before future wedding. Uh, and in the fall of 2019, I started to wake up again with some left side shoulder pain. It wasn't going away after a while, so I ended up going to a different clinic, and the clinic doctor x-rayed my shoulder, didn't see anything wrong, so what did he do? He prescribed some medical patches to kind of numb the pain. He prescribed some like massage therapy, and I had thought that it was a muscular imbalance, so I thought that the best way to fix that would have been for me to go to the gym and work out my muscle problems. So I continued running for a long time. I worked out, and on January 4th, 2020, I was finishing up at the gym, gonna do some chin ups, when I heard two loud, like pop pop in my shoulder. Intense pain, stop immediately, no idea what happened. And I thought, yeah, it must have been dislocated. I don't think I've ever heard of a broken shoulder before, so I didn't know what was really wrong. But I went to a different clinic this time than the last one. I thought the last doctor was a crack if I had this problem now. So at this new clinic, I went with my fiance. I had a blood test taken. I had an x-ray taken. The x-ray showed that my bone had a little like chip on it. I don't know how to describe it best. Uh, but he couldn't determine what it was. So I then went to the downstairs of the same clinic to do an MRI. When I came back up from the MRI, my fiance and the doctor were talking in the room. My fiance was crying because the bone in my shoulder, I'll have a picture over here. It was like marbled, moth-eaten, marbled. It wasn't good. So the doctor in charge at the time, he had assumed it was a blood-related problem, which he technically was right. But he listed some like really obscure, strange blood diseases, stuff that's like 0.01% of the population will get. So yeah, I didn't have those. So the doctor then said that I should come back the next day on a Monday alone because that would be when the bone specialist was in, and he would know better than the doctor in charge the on Sunday. So the next day, it's a Monday. I go into the clinic alone. I knew it was bad news the second that I walked into the consultation room because there was the bone doctor in uniform. There was the doctor from yesterday out of uniform. I had guessed he came in on his day off. And behind them were three nurses standing around worried. The bone doctor told me that it was definitely a tumor, but it was probably not cancer. Nonetheless, though, in case it was cancer, I would need to go to a bigger hospital. So the receptionist tried to refer me, but the first two hospitals they referred me to rejected me. I don't know the reason, but I think it was probably because that they were not equipped to handle bone cancer, um, or language barrier. I don't know. So I ended up being referred to the Osaka International Cancer Institute. There's not much international about it, as no one spoke English there. But I was originally referred to a oncologist who specialized in bone cancer. We first met on January 14th, and he had kind of agreed with the previous doctor's sentiment about it being a tumor, but probably not cancer. So he gave me a list of possibilities, and his uh, highest probability one was benign. Second one was some kind of sarcoma. I don't know exactly which one. And the third would be lymphoma. Well, we know which one it ended up being. So the doctor ordered a contrast CT scan for the same day. Contrast CT, they had me go into a CT machine with an IV in my arm. Hated needles, I still do. Go inside. The contrast dye made me feel really sick, so I had to press the emergency button. But luckily, they got a fine CT scan. So I come back, I think, a couple of days later, and the doctor is now he's adjusted his ranking. He thinks that it is probably lymphoma, but it still could be benign. That is a possibility. So he has decided now that I'm going to need a biopsy on my shoulder, and I'm also going to need a PET scan to show if it is lymphoma, to show where the lymphoma is. So I talk with some nurses and get the PET scan all settled up. And I think around this time, one of the nurses asked me where I was going to do my treatment if it was cancer, and she kind of started crying in front of me. I felt really distant from the situation. Like she was sad, but I wasn't sad. It was a very surreal moment for me, I guess is the best word to say it. Like how I was disconnected, but she was like more invested than me. Very nice lady though. So I did the PET scan, and it went without a hitch. I didn't like the needle that I needed to do before it for them to put the dye into my body. PET scan waiting room was pretty boring. I had to wait like 30 minutes, I think, with no books, no phones, no entertainment at all, just relaxing while the dye goes through my body. I got the PET scan results the night before my surgery day. The PET scan confirmed. My doctor totally deadpanned expression. He said that it is definitely lymphoma, but he thinks that it is still the appropriate course is to cut open my shoulder and take out the bone biopsy for them to know what type of lymphoma it is. He was showing us the PET scan during this time, and my fiance, now wife, she thought that it was like really, really bad, but I wasn't so concerned for some reason. I guess because I had already researched so much about lymphoma for the past like 2.5 years, I didn't think it was that bad. Probably happy it was lymphoma, not bone cancer. But yeah, the PET scan showed shoulder, hip, ribs, collarbone, pelvis, spine, and some other lymph nodes in my body. Stage 4. So I ended up doing my surgery. Surgery was not that bad. It wasn't that scary. Worst part about the surgery was probably the needles and the catheter. Is that the right word? For my surgery, I was put under anesthesia. I had to do like some kind of cross pose while they cut my shoulder open. Woke up the next day in a not the next day, the at night, a lot of pain. Um, yeah, not that bad. I stayed in the hospital for about 8 days, 7 or 8 days, because I had them worried about a fever. And I think 2 weeks later, I found out that I had diffuse large B cell lymphoma. And I think somewhere along this line too, I met my blood oncologist, and he and his resident doctor went over my treatment plan. So I was diagnosed with diffuse large B cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and this is the end of my diagnosis video. I will put up a video with I will put up a video about my treatment coming soon. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, or subscribe. If you did not enjoy the video, please comment and tell me why. How can I make it better for you? And if you want to see more of me, you can check me out on my gaming YouTube channel or my twitch.tv channel. You can find those linked in my YouTube or in the video description below. So, see you guys next time.